Imagine you've been really committed to your personal journey for years, doing the inner work, the healing, the spiritual practices, and then it seems like out of nowhere, you're just struck by this deep, kind of inexplicable hollowness, a sense that all that forward motion has just stalled, and the joy or the purpose you were heading towards has kind of drained away. And it's unsettling, right? Especially because you were actively invested in growth. So the natural reaction is to think, okay, I must have failed somehow. I'm doing this wrong. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what the wisdom traditions often call spiritual emptiness. Our mission is pretty straightforward. Let's unpack this feeling, show why it's really different from just everyday sadness, and explore why our research keeps saying this isn't a failure. It's actually a transformative threshold, like a necessary doorway on the path to genuine freedom.
That's such a crucial shift in perspective to grasp right at the start. Spiritual emptiness, sometimes it's called the void, yeah. It's this really profound internal sense where the structures you used to lean on, your sense of inner self, how you define purpose, even the stability of the world around you, it all starts to lose its solidity. It's that gap, that vacuum that's left when the old ways you understood your life just collapse. And when that happens, you're kind of stranded in this space where the new thing hasn't quite emerged yet, which feels understandably terrifyingly empty.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that. If we're saying this state has this kind of existential weight to it, how does spiritual emptiness feel different from, say, just being tired or bored or even clinical depression? What are the key internal signals the sources say we should look out for?
Yeah, the material is actually very specific about that difference. While a low mood might be about sadness over a specific event or just low energy, spiritual emptiness really centers around a profound loss of meaning. People describe it as this deep inner void. Life feels stripped of its vitality, its connection, even if things on the outside look okay. You also get this painful awareness that things you once thought were solid, like your identity, your life's purpose, cherished beliefs, suddenly feel, kind of illusory, almost terrifyingly so.
And I think what must be really confusing for someone going through it is that loss of interest, too. The very things that brought comfort before, maybe your meditation practice, prayer, even connecting with certain people, suddenly feel dry, lifeless, unhelpful. You're just left with this raw, aching yearning for something you can't even describe.
Exactly. You're yearning for truth, maybe, but all the old ways you had of finding it have just stopped working. And this is where that really crucial distinction from clinical depression comes in. Depression, clinically speaking, usually involves that pervasive low mood, difficulty with just functioning physically, severe energy loss, maybe struggling with daily tasks. It's primarily seen as psychological, maybe biological. Spiritual emptiness, while it might share some features, it really zeroes in on that loss of meaning, that disconnection from spirit or self. And it drives this hunger for a deeper truth.
Ah, okay. So it's like a loss of the existential foundation versus a loss of functional capability. It makes a huge difference.
It really does. And of course, we always have to add the caveat, right? If that feeling of emptiness comes with severe despair or suicidal thoughts or makes it impossible to function day to day, professional mental health support is absolutely essential, non-negotiable. Spiritual growth doesn't replace the need for proper care. Often they need to work together.
That makes complete sense. So now let's get into the mechanics, maybe. How does this collapse actually happen? This emptiness doesn't just appear out of the blue. The sources point to some pretty specific triggers. We've kind of grouped these into 5 common causes. What tends to destabilize things enough to create this void?
Often it seems to happen when the person has sort of outgrown their current spiritual or psychological container. The first cause is often simply spiritual awakening and the dissolution of old beliefs. When you genuinely start waking up, the mind's old frameworks could be religious dogma, inherited values, strong political identities, even just ego-driven ideas of who you are. They start to crack. They collapse. It's like finding out the foundation of your house was, built on sand.
Yeah, that structural collapse image really hits home. Like the building's condemned, but you're still living on the site while the new foundation is maybe being poured. It's messy.
Exactly. And that feeling of abandonment often connects to the second major cause, the dark night of the soul. This is a term from mystics like St. John of the Cross. It describes this period of intense spiritual dryness. The seeker feels utterly abandoned by God or source or whatever their connection was. All the previous spiritual resources, prayer, feelings of comfort, certainty, they just seem to vanish. It's often described as a kind of purification. Intense.
Then there's the third trigger, which feels maybe more common for many people. Loss or major life transitions.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think spirituality should make them immune to suffering, but intense grief, trauma, divorce, illness, even a major career change. These things force you to confront impermanence head-on. When the external scaffolding of your identity gets stripped away, sometimes that inner void is suddenly revealed.
Absolutely. And the fourth cause, this one is so relatable in our modern success-oriented culture, over-identification with ego. You chase the ego goals, the recognition, the career ladder, accumulating stuff, and maybe you even get them. And then you look around and realize it's hollow. That promotion, that perfect relationship, it didn't fill the void. It actually just highlighted it. That's kind of the classic midlife crisis, but seen through a spiritual lens.
Right. So the realization isn't I failed to get the thing, but, oh, the thing itself was empty.
Precisely. And then the final cause is sometimes just the simple emergence of existential awareness. This might come through deep philosophical thinking or contemplation, where you just start to see the fleeting, impermanent nature of everything. And that naturally triggers a crisis of meaning.
That idea of impermanence flows really nicely into the next part, which is maybe subtler but really profound. Conceptual emptiness. We've talked about the feeling of emptiness, the void. Now let's talk about the nature of emptiness itself.
Right. Conceptual emptiness is this insight, this recognition that even our mental tools, our beliefs, our concepts, our ideas about reality are themselves empty of inherent solidity. Most of us, we cling to concepts like I am a success, or this political view is the truth, or my identity is this fixed thing. We treat these labels like they're solid facts. But deeper wisdom traditions suggest these are more like mental scaffolding. Useful for talking to each other, sure, but when you look closely, they're kind of hollow. They aren't the actual reality they point to.
Okay, that sounds potentially really destabilizing. If I realize my definition of success or even a good person is just an empty concept, doesn't that kind of threaten my whole life structure?
It does, yeah. But that perceived threat is actually the doorway to freedom. Think about it. If you see that your attachment to, say, a job title is just attachment to a concept, a label without real permanent substance, then losing the job, while still maybe painful, isn't an existential catastrophe. See the difference? That's the really profound implication here.
I like that the source material gives us a little inquiry exercise, something practical to get a taste of this beyond just thinking about it. Kind of forces you to sit in that tension. So for anyone listening, maybe try this just for a moment. Don't look for an answer. Just notice the space, the feeling between the concepts. Gently ask yourself, what is between belief and no belief? Just notice what's there or not there.
Or maybe pushing it a bit deeper into identity. What is between self and no self? The mind will probably want to jump in immediately, try to label it or define it, but the practice is just to observe that maybe vastness or silence. That arises when thought hits its own limit. Doing this kind of practice helps you see the limits of language firsthand. When you sit in that in-between space, you might touch into the spacious, silent awareness that's always present underneath the concepts. And that vast, silent space, that's kind of the living essence of conceptual emptiness. It's liberating.
Okay, so let's pivot then to the payoff. We've established this void is painful, it's challenging, maybe even scary. But the traditions consistently frame it as a gift. What's the fundamental transformation? What's the wisdom that comes out of navigating this tough process?
Yeah, the wisdom traditions don't see this emptiness as some kind of spiritual sickness. It's more like a necessary cleanse. Like you can't pour new wine into a vessel that's already full of old stagnant stuff. You have to empty it first. In Buddhism, for instance, emptiness nijjhata is the core insight. It means recognizing that all things lack inherent separate existence. What does that mean practically? Well, think of a simple cup of coffee. Is it inherently coffee all by itself? No. Yeah. It needs the bean, the water, heat, a cup, your idea of coffee. Take away any of those conditions and the coffee disappears. It's dependent. It's empty of a fixed independent identity. Realizing everything is like that frees you from clinging so hard to things as if they're permanent realities. So the coffee cup is still useful. You can still enjoy the coffee, but you're not totally devastated if the cup breaks because you didn't mistake the concept for the ultimate reality.
Exactly. And you see similar ideas everywhere. In Christian mysticism, the dark night serves to purge the seeker of attachments to certainty, to doctrines, even to their own egoic ideas of God, so they become open, available, to be filled with just pure, unconditional presence. And similarly, in Sufi traditions, there's a strong emphasis on emptying the heart of worldly desires and attachments, the nafs, before real union with the divine is possible. The emptiness is like the necessary prep work, the cleanup crew for that ultimate connection. So the big transformation then is moving from a life maybe driven by these hollow, fixed concepts to a life lived more in alignment with a fluid, unconditional reality. The sources seem to summarize the gift really well. People who navigate this void often emerge with this profound authenticity, a deeper capacity for love, real freedom, because they're just not hooked on external validation or rigid ideas about who they are anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so if someone listening is currently navigating this intense space, this threshold, the material offers a pretty clear, practical pathway. And it sounds like it's not about trying to fix the void or aggressively fill it up, but more about learning how to rest in it. What are the key steps for navigating this?
Yeah, the biggest challenge initially is often non-resistance. So step one is really allow the experience fully. You have to be willing to sit with the feelings, the hollowness, the fear, the grief, without constantly distracting yourself or trying to escape. Acceptance is where the healing starts. Then, step two, practice witness consciousness. Using mindfulness, meditation, or just simple awareness practices helps you cultivate that observer perspective. This lets you experience the emptiness without becoming completely identified with it. You see it's happening, but it's not the entirety of who you are. It creates a bit of space.
And connecting back to what we discussed earlier, step 3 feels crucial. Explore conceptual emptiness. Actively engaging in that kind of direct inquiry, looking into the nature of your thoughts, your beliefs, trains the mind to rest in that awareness beyond the concepts. It's like actively engaging with the void, not just passively enduring it.
Right. And step 4 requires, well, a degree of faith. Let go of old attachments. Often the pain of the void is really the friction of us clinging tightly to old identities, old beliefs, external sources of validation that are maybe already dead or dying. You have to trust somehow that letting go makes space for something more genuine, more authentic to arise. Fifth, and this is so important because it can feel isolating, is find supportive community. The spiritual path, especially during these harder phases like the dark night, can feel incredibly lonely. Sharing what you're going through with a trusted spiritual group, a guide, or even a therapist who understands this terrain, it reduces that isolation and validates that, yes, this is a real experience.
And finally, maybe the overarching theme of this whole deep dive. Trust the process. The material consistently emphasizes that this spiritual emptiness isn't a mistake or a setback. It's that natural, necessary cocoon stage of awakening. It's preparing the soul for a genuine transformation. You really can't rush the dissolving of the old self. Wow. This has been such a critical conversation, I think, for anyone who's truly committed to inner work. Spiritual emptiness feels like this ultimate loss, like nothingness, but we've really established today that it seems to be preparation for ultimate freedom. It feels like a breakdown, but maybe it's actually a profound breakthrough, an invitation to a deeper truth. You're not broken, you're just being emptied so you can be filled with something more real.
Exactly. And that emptying process leads us right to the final kind of provocative question that this material really pushes us to consider. Conceptual emptiness, as we've discussed, involves dissolving rigid thinking, fixed ideas, leading to more fluidity, more presence in daily life. So if you start to recognize that your current, maybe even most cherished understanding of self or success or truth is built on concepts that are ultimately empty, impermanent, how does that recognition actually change the way you approach your goals, the seriousness or the effort you put into future plans? If the framework itself is seen as somewhat illusory, where do you then find genuine, lasting meaning, that fertile ground of inquiry? That's what the void leaves behind for you to cultivate.
That really is the ultimate test of authenticity, isn't it? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the transformative threshold of spiritual emptiness. We definitely encourage you to reflect, maybe gently, on the concepts you might be clinging to unconsciously as you go about your week.